Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Masks Off. I'm Kim,
And I'm Tia.
and we have with us today Jen Zash. So, as normal, I'm going to start with our quote and then we'll let Jen introduce herself. So, today's quote is go and play, run around, build something, break something, climb a tree, get dirty, get in some trouble, have some fun. That's by Brahm. You will understand more why we chose that quote. So, Jen, do you want to introduce yourself in your own words and help the listeners to understand why we chose that fun quote?
Yes, first of all, I love that quote and both of you women as well. And I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Mm.
And so I'm really excited to share my message, and once you hear a little bit about me, it will all kind of make sense. So I am Mindful Mama Jen, and I've been what I do now is I help moms move from disconnected to soul connected in their relationship with their children, very often moving their homes and hearts from hot mess to harmonious home. And I do that through my Mindful Mama 3-month program, but also just in my interactions with really any mom or caretaker. So a lot of educators as well. I've been a 20-year school psychologist as of this year. Um, and I worked with little ones as a preschool teacher way back when, all the way up to college age. And in the last 14 years, I've been at the high school level as a school psychologist in a really, really high achieving school district. It's one of the best schools in the whole nation, actually. So people come from all over. And so in the last year, I've taken a personal leave in relation to COVID. I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids of my own, a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. And we just didn't know with this pandemic what the year was going to look like. And so I walked the walk, and I really wanted to be present for my children, and figured, you know what, if I'm not making a salary, because I was pausing from doing that as a school psychologist, then that's okay. I need to put one foot in front of the other and be present, and we'll get through it. And so that's where we are. And in doing so, all of these amazing opportunities have opened up, and the entrepreneur world. And so I have been for a little over 6 months been working with these moms in the context of this program, and it's been incredible. I wish I had something like this when as a mom, because I think it's a really isolating, unfortunately, position, so to speak. And I think if you talk to most moms, they feel just really burnt out and like a million wheels spinning, lots on their plate, but that they have to it just is the way it is. And that's simply not true. And so I've been able to provide moms with a community of other moms where they're able to feel like, wow, I'm actually not that messed up and I'm not screwing up my kids. And it's been so beautiful to see not only how they've shifted in communicating and interacting with their children and tuning to them, but also personally on a mom level, just being separate from their kids and rediscovering who they are again,
Mhm.
and watching them pursue these dreams in such a short amount of time has been, for me, like, I don't know if it's the most exciting part, but maybe because it was unanticipated, really, really neat to see. So
Mm,
yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Wow,
love
that
that.
is fantastic. I love that.
That's incredible. And I love just how you talk about it. Your energy is just so clear in that your love for this work is
Oh,
right there. It's incredible. So with that quote and what we were going to talk about today and then see where the conversation goes, because I know you're going to have just amazing tidbits, is talking about, as we grow and become moms in particular, or any caregiver or parent, we lose that childlike state within us and the playfulness. So how do you help parents, moms who've lost that sense of play and childlike connection to themselves or to with their kids? How do you approach that with parents moving forward?
Yeah, so there's a few things. I mean, like I said, separate from even the program, a lot of what I do is modeling so that, I'm not on social media a lot. And part of that is because I really want to be present with whoever I am with in each moment, or myself.
Mm.
And so I do feel, as silly as it might sound, that I'm like allergic to technology. And I literally, I
Love
feel like
that.
at the cellular level, it's just like ick. And so, but when I do use it is very intentionally. And so, for instance, um, after school, when most kids are running around to 47 different activities, and then coming home and doing an inordinate amount of schoolwork after they've already been little grown-ups all day long in a classroom setting, sitting with very little, time for play, which I can get back to that too, but it's gotten so much worse over time. So I will very intentionally like post things like that on social media, so that parents have permission and encouragement and inspiration, hopefully, to play with their kids, to be present with their kids, to reclaim family time. And I think it really, I've always been someone who kind of like shakes things up. And so it's, people either get really really scared, but even still they listen, I think. And a lot of responses I'll get is, we can do that, we can like say to a teacher or our kids, like, we're not going to do homework today. And I say, it's not about that, it's, you want to work with the school. So like every year at the beginning of the year, I talk to my children's teachers about my philosophy, about what our family values are. And so in my program, I'm working with the moms that I work with too. There's a big component of, like, part one is a lot of Dr. Shafali's work in conscious parenting and just being present and attuning to our children, and that you can read all of the books, but that's not going to really do much for you. In fact, I think in my experience, it screwed me up a whole lot more, because we don't give ourselves enough credit, right? Like, we know instinctually, especially with our kids, when we start to still ourselves, how to become attuned to them, so that in real time we can figure out what it is our kids need. And I do have a framework that I can also tell you, that I share with my parents, so that it's quick, because moms need something that's simple and quick and easy, right? So first I'll talk about, like, finish the story about the educators, and then I'll talk about the moms. So, because I think they're inextricably linked. And I want our kids to know that we're working collaboratively with the best of intentions, and that whether it is a teacher or a parent or whomever it is, that we're all doing our best. It just may look really different. And so, so I meet with the teachers and I explain to them that I feel very strongly that kids need to be kids. And, as you know, the title of today's podcast is Fireflies and Mudpies. And that is because there is no greater joy and bliss than that childlike sense of awe and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And so kids are born with that. And my mission is to do whatever we can to preserve it. It's not that we need to teach it, we need to preserve it in them. And that's twofold, both in our houses with, as the mom, as well as in the classroom setting, which, depending upon where your kids go to school, there's all different educational settings, right? Some classrooms might be much more demanding and like that traditional model, teacher directed, versus, let's say, a Montessori school or somebody who's homeschooling. So it's going to be a little bit different, but I think the key is communication. And for us, whether it's family values being shared with our kids in the context of the home, or with their teachers, saying, look, it's really important for us to have downtime, and for you to also, I'm going to respect you, is what I say to the teachers, and do my best to support you, but let's keep the lines of communication open. That I really do believe kids need time for rest and time to discover where their interests lie, their passions. So I think time for curiosity and creativity, because I think that leads to kids finding their inherent passions and ultimately their purpose and their path. And I see that getting squelched for 20 years now. And so, I do feel so fortunate that I have both of those lenses, both as a mom and as an educator and as a child myself, where I also grew up in a home very much about play. And so it was modeled for me as well. And so I think, I mean, I've been really successful in working with the teachers for the most part. Of course, not all of them. I also meet with all the administrators. So I meet with the principal, and I buy all of them the book Beyond Measure by Vicky Abelis, who, if you heard of the documentary The Race to Nowhere, it's kind of the follow-up to that. And just this idea that we're on this like treadmill, this race to what? And the to what is to this idea of success, but how we define success is vastly different from one person to the next.
Right.
Potentially, at least for me, my definition is very different than sort of that traditional model of school. And I don't fault the teachers. I think it's just the world that we're living in too has shifted so dramatically, and the United States is looking at these other countries to and test scores, and then you have the media that's publishing what the best schools are. And what is that based on? Well, if you look at what it's based on the number of AP classes. It's based on like everything related to demand and performance and outcome. And I'm all about like the journey and the gray and the joy and the bliss. And I do think that learning is wonderful, but where the problem lies is when that curiosity for learning is squashed, and we're not allowing the student to lead or do the dance with the teacher. That's where the trouble kind of comes in. So
Yeah, I can definitely speak on that because
Yeah.
before I had my kids, and my son's 21, but I was a high school teacher. And so coming from the pressure from administration, well, really from the state. So I live in New York, so you know how it is with the regents exams and things like that, that there's so much pressure on teachers to teach to the test. It's all about, and again, I don't know if I just said, but I taught high school. So I had the high school kids. So it was all about the regents exam, all about the regents exam. I actually at one point chose to take the at-risk kids because they had like a school within a school.
I love that.
And so with the at-risk kids, fortunately or unfortunately, they weren't held to the same standards as the mainstream. It allowed me more flexibility because I didn't have to necessarily stick to that test the way others did, because there wasn't the expectation that they were going to pass anyway. There wasn't even the expectation they would come to school, but it allowed me to be more creative in what I could teach. And that's why no one in the English department wanted the target program. They're like, why are you choosing that? Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
There's a method to my madness. And once I made connections with those students, it wasn't all of them, but once I learned how to connect, then they wanted to learn. They were engaged. It was different than at that standpoint. And, talk about play, like I had them we did fundraisers where they sold candy bars and they earned money and saved up. And then at the end of the year, we took the money and we went to Great Escape, which is in like the Adirondacks of New York. So it's an amusement park. And they were so all about it. You should have seen these kids selling candy bars. They're like coming in with their boxes every day. Like, I need more candy bars. But it was just, and then I created all kinds of lesson plans around that. Do you know what I mean? So it was life. It was more like life, learning, creativity, play, all of that. And it was so different, but the way the state, and I don't know how it is across the country, but the state of New York, and these freaking tests, standardized tests.
Yes.
Talk about taking the life out of learning.
Yeah. Yeah, they're soul killers too. So they kill the learning, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm in New York too. So I mean,
yeah, so the same lens.
But I love that love that story. And I think it speaks to so much. There's really a lot there. There's that hope that there is another way, right?
Mhm.
And there's
Right.
also, you use the word connect. And that is that's essential to everything, right? That's what life is all about, is connecting.
Yep.
And when you're so focused on a test and an outcomes and all of that, and there's so much research to support too, that like even in the book Beyond Measure that I mentioned before, where they gave two groups of children a reading passage, and then one of the groups, they said you're going to be tested on it, and the other group, they just said read for fun. And the
Mhm.
group that was just reading for pure enjoyment actually took the test as well, but they did better on it, which is like
Right.
so fascinating, right? And so there's so much out there like that because people forget that kids have free will, and when we're putting these demands on our children at home and at school, and then they do something sneaky or they rebel in whatever way they do, we just get all like upset, and we think it's a reflection on us, and
Right.
why are they, but it's not about that. And it's
Mhm.
just we've really zapped their childhood, their free will. And so and that idea, I mentioned the word purpose before, and you said that it was like real life, right? And they were getting excited, and I love that. And I think that's what really like education needs to be. Life needs to be the classroom, because
Mhm.
it makes it so much more meaningful, the learning too, instead of just like this separate. And that's just good teaching anyway. Like you learn that, in graduate school, what's best practices and what's good teaching. But yet when I reflect back on my childhood, I remember one particular example in seventh grade, and I had this teacher, and we were, it was a math teacher, and if I wasn't a school psychologist, I wanted to become a math teacher. So I love math, but this teacher, and if I honestly forget what the topic was, I must have really repressed it emotionally.
Mhm.
But I said, what do we need this for in life? And I wasn't looking to be a pain in the neck.
Right.
I mean, I could be at times, but I really wasn't. And she made me turn my desk around, very, very like old school,
Oh
traditional.
my
And
goodness.
really, there was such a sense of shame and helplessness. And for the rest of that year, I hated that teacher. And it took a topic that I know that I typically loved, and the message, it was very clear,
And I
like
bet you, how well did you do in that class? Did
I
you
probably did well.
still
Also,
did
I
well?
thought, screw you, I'll show you
Yeah.
anyway. And I didn't get diagnosed until graduate school with ADHD, but for some reason, it was the one subject where I could just do and come back and do really well. But yeah, part of that was a lot of times she was yelling at me for not paying attention, and so I think it was like, see, oh, if I wasn't paying attention, how could I do this well?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Wow.
But very often that is the case, and I have had other subject areas where when you don't get that connection and that meaning, then I certainly didn't do as well. And I see it, in the high school students and the little ones that I worked with. When you feel like they're not attuned to you, like they're not, we call it in psychology, like joining the resistance. And like I said, I wasn't looking to be resistance, but everybody wants to know like what's in it for me.
Sure.
Regardless, it's just life. Our time is so valuable. It's the one thing we can't get back. And so when we can make, as an educator and as a mom, our children understand like why it's important that they know something, usually it makes life a lot easier for everybody involved.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Well, and
would
then there's the
love to see,
buy-in. Go ahead, Kim.
I was going to say, I would love to see such a paradigm shift just in education and the parenting. And I know it's going to take time. And I would love to see like yoga being implemented, mindful eating. How many freaking kids end up with eating disorders, not just because of the emotional stuff, that's a big part of it, but they have 20 minutes to eat their lunch. It's like, just inhale it. It's
Even
just
have lunch. So that's a big fight that I fought in my high school that
Mm.
I worked in for years, is like they don't even have to have lunch. So that way they can
yeah,
add another advanced placement.
Oh my
that, yeah,
goodness.
So
it's just,
I feel, the parents are blaming the school and the school's blaming the parents.
I
But
know.
I'm saying, look, we have a responsibility as a school. If we say every kid has to have lunch, then we explain to the colleges
Yeah.
And now we've done the right thing. And yet there was a lot of resistance. And you know, the school that I've worked at for so long, like I said, it was one of the best in the nation. It is one of the best in the nation, even more so this year. It was just ranked. And so we're considered a lighthouse district. So like people, school districts and then organizations look to our district. And to me, that's such an opportunity that
Right.
let's get out there and say, screw this, we're not doing the SATs and the ACTs anymore. And
Yep.
here's all the reasons why.
Yep.
You know, I hope you have a lot of time, because like from a mental health perspective, but even from their intentions, if you look at like the correlation between how kids do on those exams, there's only a correlation, a significant correlation between how they perform in the exam in their first year of college, and it's only 0.16% correlation. So I mean,
Wow.
they're killing themselves for these
Yeah.
stupid exams that there's very little meaning behind, and the cost.
I was going to say, it's become such a profitable industry though right now with all the tutors. Listen, I paid for my daughter to have an SAT coach, so you just get caught up in the rat race of it all. But
Yeah,
again, what?
yeah, you do or you don't. I mean, it is possible, really, and that is my like. That's probably my biggest legacy, I think, is just like I refuse to succumb to get to that. And I'm not in the easiest of situations, because I'm in, you know, I'm divorced, and my ex-husband has a really different philosophy than I do. And he has that sort of stereotypical definition of what success is. And again,
Yeah.
his intentions are good, I'm sure, just like these other parents who feel like if they don't do these things, they're not being a good mom. If they don't get them the SAT, you know, tutoring. And I'm not, you know,
Yeah.
it's a knock on you or any parent.
Oh yeah.
I think that there, you know, we look around at what everybody else is doing, and then then the story that they tell themselves is like the majority of people, which is this
Right.
is what has to happen to what? To get into a good school, for what? To get to a good job and have security and make money. And then those are the same people that are miserable and that end up, you know, with some spiritual awakening, if they're lucky, at
Right.
50, 60, 70 years old,
Right.
looking back and saying, oh my gosh, I lost decades of my life because I put on this mask because of what society says success is. And it really doesn't have to be like that. And so that's why I will use the platform of social media, especially in those instances, to really model and to challenge parents, educators, politicians, everyone and anyone who will listen, that like there really is another way and kids can succeed. And actually, again, the research shows they usually do much better on every level.
So if there were listeners or moms that are wanting to make some small changes and incorporate more play, or they have some awareness that the old way isn't working, we got to do something different. How can we begin to start to incorporate this play and just shift some? Because I mean, everyone's busy, like you said in the beginning of the interview. Everyone is juggling so many things, and like play, are you kidding me? That's the last thing I have time for.
Totally. So there's like a kind of higher framework that I can give you to the listeners and for you both too. And it's based on the work that I do with the moms. And kind of like step one is like mindfulness, basically. So just like, am I present? And so what moms can do, and parents and educators, is like, am I present? How do you become present? Step one is put the freaking phones away. Right, like we're telling our kids,
right,
and that's hard, you know. And it's like there's a lot of serenity prayer that I use, and because some things are really out of our control, right? Like so if our kids are going to school, and now what does school look like? It's behind a screen, and it's like very cringy for me. But so I have to let go of certain things, but then that other time is that much more precious. And so for me, like, I'm not addicted to my device. Like, I know so many other people are. And again, it's not a knock on them. It's, this is how they were built, these phones, and
Right.
to make us addicted. And so, but working on that, the first step is just that awareness. And so for me, what I'll tell moms is like, if your kids are with you, leave the phone in the car. And I've done that accidentally, and hours later have realized, oh, I don't have my phone. Whereas most people probably realize much sooner. I don't. Because this is so part of who I am, just this like connection and play, and we're outside as much as possible. So that's another big piece is, I always say, like, try to match screen time with green time to the best of
I
your ability.
love that.
Yeah. And it's really like a tangible kind of thing, and that you can tell your kids, you can, put it up somewhere so that you remember. I'm a big, like, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. That's just me. So I have like Post-its and signs, and I have, pictures with like our family values that we talk about, like what's important to us. Like my one rule and this is another thing parents can do. So part one is like, am I present? That's the question you want to be asking yourself throughout the day. Am I present? The next question is, it's based on this idea in acceptance and commitment therapy called choice point. And what that means basically is like, it combines mindfulness, but it also combines it with our values. So like, am I living a life that's in alignment with my values? And we don't think about that a lot. And before I got certified in ACT, I didn't really think about it, but I knew I was on the right path because I had already really been practicing mindfulness, but I felt like there was something missing. And that was what was missing. It's because we have our goals that we focus on, but goals are different than values.
Totally.
And so when we take a look at our values, and there's so much on the internet that, like, in the interest of time for your viewers, they can certainly contact me. And I can help guide them, even just like for free consultation, because they can also be very overwhelming going on the internet too. But once you find out what your values are, so in my case, I have become such a workaholic, and it wasn't until the COVID pause and getting the certification that I was like, oh my God, there's nothing more important to me than relationships. And yet I'm not spending any time there really, unless the kid or the person that I'm working with is having suicidal thoughts, because that's what I've worked with, is just in a mode of handling crisis as a school psychologist. If it was just to kind of hang out with a friend or family, it was, no, I could be saving someone's life right now. And that's not healthy either. So here I am trying to teach parents and educators to regulate themselves so that they get out of that hyper arousal fight or flight state. And yet I'm in it myself, just because of the role that I've been operating as a school psychologist for so long. So that was really eye-opening for me. And I really started shifting and asking myself the question too, after am I present, is, am I moving towards or away from being in connection with my kids? And that's the question that I have moms ask, in my program. But in the traditional model of choice point, it's, am I moving towards or away from the life I want to be living in accordance with my values? And so it's going to look bigger than just in the context of your children. Any questions about that or thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Kim and I have a course, it's called Aligning with Your True North. And one of our true norths is their true north value, because if we aren't aware of what our value system is, how do we know what direction we're going? And like you said, I love that. Are we moving towards or away? And it's such an important way to come back and return and remember, like, oh, wait a minute. Is this choice in alignment with myself and what I want to bring in with my children or my family or in my relationship, whatever it is in your work? It encompasses so much. But like you said, we haven't been taught that. No. How many of us were taught that?
Exactly.
You just fly by the seat of your pants a lot of the time, or you do what other people have told you, like in the school system or in the conditioning. But what is right for you as an individual, and what do you want to pass along and have that? Because that's really part of your legacy.
100%. And a big part of what I also have learned a lot about and received some recent training, and because it's huge, is our habits. And so it's our conditioning, like you said, in terms of society and all of that, but also our own habits. Because how many times, I know for myself, are we doing something and we're thinking, I shouldn't be doing this. I know this is not in my best interest, or my kid's best interest, or and we have these hidden, this is where the masks also kind of come on. Like, you know, if people saw me doing this now, and in my case as a psychologist, like, it was, then there's the layers of shame. So it really, it breaks that cycle. So the moms that I'm working with, I have them in each moment, like, and journaling on it. Because I buy them this like mindful mama kits also, like, you know, just breaking those habits. That's like my big goal, is let's change things. It doesn't have to be big, but it's, you know, they have this little post-it or a pretty printout of it, just with the questions. Am I present? Am I moving towards or away? Which, like I said, it's a choice point. I had yesterday on my wrist, you could probably see the remnant still, CP. For myself, just choice point. It's a reminder throughout my day. So that way with my kids in particular, I'm not getting caught in that whirlwind of seeing the dishes and my, you know, bitchy attitude, because I'm thinking all the things I have to do.
Right.
Look at my wrist. That works for me. You know, it's just those visual reminders. But that's really important, is looking at your habits and doing what you can in small steps to change it. And when you have these questions, this is a small, simple way to do it. And it also takes away that storyline. That's what I love about it. So in each moment, just, is this, forget about the story, because we can convince ourselves of anything, right? I know I'm like the queen of rationalization, or I was anyway, I'm working on it. And so just, is this towards or away? And then it's a lot, you know, more difficult to kind of lie to ourselves. And we catch ourselves, and because then we have to actually intentionally go away from our kid, which feels not so good, instead of on automatic pilot away from them. And then that last question is just like, what action step can I take? So activating, and that could be going outside and playing. That could just be, am I really listening to what they're saying and tuning to it? Or am I so in my head with everything that I need to do? As moms, it's so hard. We have so much to get done. But that's why that value piece, you know, that you both spoke about too, in your true north, it's so powerful. One of the acronyms too that I've come up with is YMCA. Like, I love to sing the songs at every wedding. So and it's another way to kind of remind ourselves. So the why is like, what's the why, which is like the values, right? But it's also you, and looking at you instead of at our kids. And so, like, am I present, and am I being triggered right now? Because, you know, with Dr. Shafali's work, if we're responding in a way that's so reaction instead of response, and so over the top, and they didn't really do anything like so crazy, like, we need to look at ourselves. So that's the why. The M is like a magic moment. So making sure every day that you have, it could be a magic minute. Ideally, it's like at least 10 minutes of one-to-one time with your child, where they get to direct what you're doing with them, and everything else gets, like, you know, your phone shut off and you're fully present with them. The longer you can do that, you know, the better. But at least, you know, I had one mom who was like, it's stressing me out. And I said, could you, and that's where this came from, just the magic minute. She's like, that I could do. I said, okay, so then you come up with either that term or another term with your child, and they can look forward to that magic minute every day. And so that's the M, where you're just in full presence with your child. And then the C, again, as we talked about, is choice point and connection. So am I moving towards or away from being a connection? And then that A is what we talked about, that action step or activate. So YMCA, some people just respond, like, it helps them remember it better.
I have the song in my head now.
Good. Okay, good. Hopefully it won't drive you too crazy. But it's, you know, different things work for different people, right? For some it's song, for some it's post-its, for some it's journal writing, whatever works for everyone. And then that habits piece is huge. So kind of changing up what they're doing. So another thing moms can do is just, like, their kids come home, it's okay, let's get outside right away. Whereas maybe normally they do whatever they do now. It's just doing something different, so that we could start to rewire that brain and take advantage of that neuroplasticity too.
So how do you navigate? I mean, I'm kind of gathering, I think I know what your answer may be, but because you get resistance from moms. I have too much to do, so they have all that conditioning. They've lost that childlike piece of them.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that for their child to stay connected to their childlike sense of wonder, it means we need to start to embrace our own sense of wonder. And so you get that I have too much to do, whatever their resistance storyline is. Where have you found the best crack, to get in and be like, okay, but what if, and help them shift into that? You do still have that childlike, playful part of you.
100%. That's such a great question. And my personality is very playful. So I've never really lost that. Even when I had masks on throughout my life, it's just my default. So, but I understand that most adults are not like that.
Right.
And that's part of why I'm not married anymore, because it drove me crazy, But one of the best way that I've seen with the moms that I work with, believe it or not, has been this homework assignment that came up just very organically, where I made the moms watch Bad Moms. And I told them that their homework was to do as little as possible for that next week until we met again, because we meet once a week as a group. And I encouraged them to journal on it, because then every week when we meet too, we talk about our wins. So now they're also starting to pay attention more to the wins, where we place our attention is everything. And the brain naturally looks for the negative, right? That's what kept us alive back when there was tigers, but that's not the case anymore. And now we're the tiger moms, right? So that definitely shifted every single mom that I've ever worked with. Like, it's so interesting. And so I said, you're gonna be a bad mom. You're gonna watch Bad Moms. It's not, they're not really a bad mom.
Right.
I'm sending them clips, like throughout the week. And I'm telling them their only goal is to keep their kid alive. But other than that, especially if they have a spouse, a big part too of why we have so many issues with like our spouses and our kids and everyone in our world is we don't communicate well and we don't create a context. We have our own agenda and we come in and assume that they're going to know what our agenda is, right? So, our spouse comes home and they're like, this is what we're doing this weekend. And meanwhile, you had what you were. But if we create a context and we say, I tell the moms that I work with, like, tell your husband, if they're married, that my mindful mama coach is making me do this, because it also kind of like takes the pressure off of them. I'm not allowed to really do much this week. I have to do as little as possible to keep the kids alive. Other than that, I have to do what kind of find my joy. And that's the other piece that I tie to the homework, is see if you can come up with doing one thing at least every single day. And it was different for all of them. Like,
I was just going to ask, what kind of things did they come up with?
So like this last round, one was writing. She just loves writing. And out of that birthed this whole blog that she started. Out of that, then she applied for this TED Talk that I had said, I got this thing. And so just organically, once she opened that up, and this was someone who was very much like, I just don't have play. She couldn't even stand the sounds. Like, she wanted, and her husband was the same way. Like, they would hide in their room because it was just that it was, we all have different triggers too. Right. So once you start becoming aware of your triggers, then I have the moms that I work with kind of step aside, take some deep breaths. I give them some tools to regulate their system. And then they're asking, how can I now step back out there to connect with my child? And so all of those ways. But when we create that context, we tell, our spouse and our kids, this is what I'm working on in this program. So things are going to be a little bit different, and we're all in this together. So I also have the moms that I work with, like, ask their spouse if they're married and their kids, like, what's working in this house and what isn't. I have them institute if it works for them, because there's never a one size fits all. I really want to meet my parents where they're at. So for one mom, she was like, I can't do a family meeting. I can't do, like I said, 10 minutes. I can't do certain things. It was just too much. It all felt like too much for her. And so fine, then don't do it. We figured out with every mom, like what just is going to work for them. So for one, it might be putting up a picture of Brene Brown's parenting manifesto,
Mhm.
just that everybody sees and knows this is what's important. So in my house, like every person that walks in the door knows my only rule is be kind. And they've known that, like all my the friends of my kids, my own like, and so that scares the crap out of a lot of parents. Like, what do you mean you know the rules? And obviously I don't want anybody getting hurt, but that kind of is tied to that. And it really is huge, and it's become so part of my children's core. And another thing that moms can do, and that we can all do, and I can't take credit for this, but one of the mindfulness meditation retreats that I went on with Corey Mascara, who is my meditation teacher, Dr. Oz's guru, if he needs some authority. He did this activity with us where he had us write about, and then paired us after we did so in dyads, what's our like resume up to date in terms of, let's say, career and all that, versus like what would our eulogy resume be. And if we had somebody saying our eulogy right now, like would it be what we want, how we want it
I
to
love
be?
that.
It was so powerful for me. And again, it's tied to, I think, those values that at the time I didn't have the framework of acceptance and commitment therapy and choice point, but I do see them as really connected. And that task with the high school students that I worked with worked better than anything, where I would just talk about the eulogy resume. And it really was amazing. And then they would tell their friends. And I had a new principal a couple of years ago, and I said to him, he didn't have tenure, which is a big thing that people get nervous about when they're first starting. And I said, instead of college day, where kids are wearing their college shirts, could we do like character day, where kids are wearing like kindness or loyalty, or for my daughter it would have been like imagination, because she's an artist, and then that's the resume that they're building their whole life, the joy resume, the childlike sense of awe and wonder. He was like, I love that. And as soon as I get tenure, then maybe we'll consider that. But it's, to me, like, that is so important. And I've never had anybody say, no, that's not important, because it is what matters at the end of the day, more than anything.
Love that. The joy resume. That's just the concept of that flips everything that school tells us it's supposed to be, that culture tells us. And the ability that you did that activity with high school students, to have a peek into that at that age versus what you were saying at the beginning of our conversation, people don't realize it till they're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. So to have that as part of their foundational piece to remember in their teen years, oh my gosh, it's just an incredible way for them to hold on to that playfulness that so many of us, you're fortunate, but I lost my playfulness in adulthood. It was more, do, the shoulds, all of this that I'm still reconnecting with that playful part of me, that childlike awe. And you mentioned, the getting outside, that's where I find it again.
I was just going to say, is that where you find it?
That's exactly where I find it.
A lot of people for art or music, but I think nothing quite like nature brings us to that place, because we realize then that there's something so much bigger than us. It really does kind of stop you.
It does. And I spent so much time outside as a kid. That's where I was, it was back in the day where it's like, get out of the house, we'll see you at dinner time.
And that's why it is, I think, so much more challenging for kids nowadays, because it's just, they have their devices, and in school and outside of school. So, I mean, if there was one thing, like I have friends who have gone to some of these retreats with Corey Mascara, where I'm like, just give it a try, even if it's a half day with him. And because they'll like learn from me, but it's kind of like your mom. When it's your friend or your mom, it's a little bit and what all those people who had that little bit of like cynical side, or like perceived it as sort of woo-woo, what the biggest takeaway for all of them was, just when they had to be without their phone for even a couple hours, the shock at how good that felt. is what was surprising to them. They felt like it was going to be really hard, but they didn't think that there would be so much positive that came out of it. And that's what they took over the long haul too. I think that piece more than anything else, because we don't realize what, we don't know what we don't know. And if you're constantly attached to your device, it's not until you're away from it for a while that you realize, oh my gosh, I just feel, because otherwise we are constantly in that hyper arousal state, and we're expected to multitask, and multitasking is, there's brain researchers show you just can't do it. So it's putting like so much additional stress, like chemically, that we feel in our body, and our nervous system is just so like out of whack, because we're, notifications are popping up, and this is where like my diagnosis of ADHD is a gift in a lot of ways, because people look at me like, don't you hear your phone like and I have 4 million like unread emails, and doesn't that bother you that you see that number? And I'm like, nope.
And you say that just made me become hyper arousal that you have 4 million. I have to clear my emails immediately. If I have more than 10 or 15 text
4,841.
Oh my God, that just made me hyper aroused.
Isn't that fascinating?
It's not even my
just
phone.
be with that in your body.
See?
Where do you feel?
And they're not even yours.
It's not even my phone. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But that's the reaction that I get, even from even from my own kids who do this with me since forever.
Yeah,
because it is the world that we're living in, and then we also bring to the table like our personalities. So I'm not by nature someone who has to have things in a certain way, and there's a downside to that. Like organizing is really hard for me. I have to work at it. It's the number one reason why my marriage didn't work. I would always say, no one ever died saying, I wish I did one more dish. So like and you're drawn to your opposite. So he, I think, wanted that free spirit play. But like my aunt, the social worker, says, we basically were married to each other's version of hell. He had more of those like OCD kinds of tendencies. I had the ADD, and it was. So you have to, it's about balance, and it's about, like I said, small changes in terms of habits and our sort of default. But so I think, and that magic minute or 10 minutes that we do with our kids has been another great way that the moms that I've worked with have been able to rediscover the play, just to expand a little more on the question that you asked, Tia, about how you can find it again. And try. So when we are connecting with our kids and they're taking the lead, they're surprised to find, wow, I really loved, coloring or painting, or being outside. I also, if I could, I would never wear shoes. That's just me. And so there's a lot of research around that too now, just being like walking and, on grass and grounding, it's called. And it really offsets some of that, like, radiation junk that comes out of those devices. So I tell parents, get outside with your kids and get barefoot. And I don't care if it's winter, like, what's the likelihood you're gonna get frosted? If you do, assume it, but I don't tell my New Yorkers that, because they will assume it. No, I'm just kidding. But nature's huge, and art and music. And then kids are, if our intention and our goal, we do more for our kids than we do for ourselves.
Right.
So if we, and especially the moms that I'm working with, like, they do tend to be my ideal clients. So they are so invested in trying a different way, because like you said, even if, what do you say to moms who are like, I can't do it, right? Like, I have so much going on. Just getting back to that other question too. I ask them, how is that serving you? Like, or if I want to not be so like psychologist, like, how's that working out for you?
Right.
As they're like, drinking their barrel of wine and talking about their one moment of escape that they're going to get, and calling that self-care when it's really escape from their own life for a brief moment. Like, that's no way to live. And so while we think that we're stuck, in our way. And that's why I think COVID, what with all of the negative that came along with it, there was, if we took advantage of it, which I certainly did, there was that pause. There was that opportunity that may never get again in our life.
Right.
And unlike any other opportunity we ever had in our life, to really stop and pause and evaluate like what's working and what's not. And we're at this, paradigm shift moment in education, I think in every aspect of the world right now.
Yeah.
And there's still time for pause and reflection. So if you're listening to this, take stock of what is working and what's not. And whatever's not working, change it, but do it with somebody. Get a coach, get a therapist, get somebody who is going to encourage you to make those changes. Because that's the other essential piece, is surrounding yourself with other people who are going to be open to and encourage you to make some changes. Because the majority of people, and the brain, the way it works is it doesn't like change. It likes predictability. Even if your predictable life sucks.
Right.
Because it finds safety in that security. And so if we know that, that's why I also talk so much about brain research with my high schoolers, but even with my own kids, because they get it. And if we say like, this is the brain, it's tricking you because it's not, and you could say, thank you for trying to keep me safe, brain, but also I'm miserable.
Yes.
And I want to be happy. I have this one life to live, and what can I look at? And the brain's going to freak out if it's like something so dramatic, like changing your career or, getting divorced or something like that. So you're not going to go straight away to that. It's going to be something small first. So like, maybe it is this week I started my small changes. I'm on day 3 of putting water next to my bed and drinking it because I suck at, drinking water. And so making those small changes. And also this year, I've surrounded myself with people who really want to make a big change in the world and who are just so good-hearted and doing the best they can, who show up messy. And that's freaking awesome because that's real, that's authentic, that's masks off.
Totally.
Right? And that's everything. So that's really important too. You want to surround yourself with people who are going to help you move forward in changing your life so that so you can be happy.
Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. Like, what a great conversation. So many great pointers for all of our listeners. Tia has a few quick questions that we rapid fire questions, and then I'm going to ask you at the end to just share with the listeners how they can find you. So Tia, do you want to go ahead and shoot with those questions?
I am ready. Are you ready, Jen?
Ready.
All right. So here it's play, right? So this is another way of how play can look differently. It doesn't always have to be what you think it is. It can be playful in so many different ways, that creativity piece. So number 1, what's the most prominent mask you wear or have worn and are working on taking off?
So the most prominent mask, I didn't wear a mask until I went to Binghamton, until I got to college, and until I started defining success like most people, because prior to that I didn't. I lived out loud, I was confident, I was free, I really practiced all those C's: the curiosity, the creativity, the connection, the confidence, like community. And then I went to Binghamton. Suddenly I wasn't like the best anymore, and things didn't come so easy, and I felt isolated. And so I started putting on a mask, and then I did that for 20 years. And a lot of that too is when I was diagnosed with ADHD and I started taking medication, and I didn't have that ignorance is bliss state anymore that people used to say to me, I wish I could be like that.
Yeah.
And then it was pop a pill. Oh, this is why everybody's scared of posting things. Or this is why. And I started wearing that mask. And so when I started practicing mindfulness, though, I took the mask off and I teased Corey Muscona, my teacher. I say, you should have had one of those little like Surgeon General warnings. Your whole life's going to change. And I got divorced, and I just woke up. And once you wake up and you start seeing, showing up for your life, you can't unsee. So you can even, I guess, get a tougher mask. I don't know, but that was not an option for me. So
Yeah.
I thought I took the mask off, but every day there's more and more layers that I don't know about until the next day.
Right. I love that. And you're helping others take off the mask that you had put on. It's beautiful. So if you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Oh gosh. My initial thought, the impromptu, was just kind of like a time machine so I can hop around. But no, it was also Bali. I don't know. I just it's somewhere that I've wanted to go. And yeah.
That sounds amazing. So what's your favorite way to take care of yourself?
Playing, being outside in nature, barefoot, connecting with my kids, listening to their laughter, which I think is nature's true medicine, and just being, not doing.
Love it. If you have a bucket list, what's at the top of it?
To keep doing what I've been doing in the last year, which is taking each moment intentionally and saying, like, am I living as authentically as possible? Am I modeling for my kids, like, the lessons that I want them to be picking up? And connecting, that's a goal for me, because I still do have that habit of working, and especially newer to this entrepreneurial world. I love learning, and so I could just, spend 20 hours reading, but then I'm not connecting. So trying to, self-care, I think that's part of it, and honoring, like for me, by nature, I'm more of an extrovert, whereas my kids tend to be a little more introvert-like. So what's going to energize me is different than what's energizing them. So for me, self-care is connecting, with amazing women like you.
Awesome. And then the last question is, what's one book that changed your life?
Oh, The Four Agreements. Absolutely. It's become like my Bible. I would recommend it to everyone. It's actually free online, so anyone can read it. But it's, be impeccable with your word. Don't take things personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And knowing that, like, your best may be different, one moment and the next. So that book has been this guidepost for more aligned, authentic living.
And what's so beautiful is it's simple. It shows you it doesn't have to be complicated.
Absolutely. I feel like those Italians with their cooking, it's always simple. Like, I think about that, and it is the most simple. It's like, that's why kids instinctually know that you don't need all the things and everything. It's so ironic, but simplicity really is where the true joy and the true bliss is. I love those questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much again for being here today and being part of our podcast. So if people want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
Thank you for having me. First of all, it was so
it's been a pleasure.
I adore you both. So they could find me on my website. It's Jen Zash, JenZash.com. And on there is information about me and about my program. And then I'm also co-authoring a book on a new paradigm of education.
Awesome.
And so that's going to be coming out probably in July. Initially, we were thinking release June, but it's looking more like July, and it's with authors from around the world in all different kinds of educational settings. So you had brought up before something about a new paradigm of education.
I love it.
Just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. So
yes, I can't wait till it comes out.
Yes,
amazing.
About that too. So
we'll have to get once you have the link for it, we can add it to the show notes, because this will be coming out in July. So you may have it by then. If not, we can always add it in later for people who listen to this, and then they can access it.
Because in there will be a lot more in terms of the questions that you asked about what parents can do, what educators do to maintain that sense of play and joy and wonder and connection and all of that. So
that is exciting.
This has been such a powerful interview podcast. So thank you so much, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could do anything to support the both of you and your mission, please let me know.
Thanks,
we definitely will. We definitely will. So thank you, everybody, for listening, watching, and supporting. And hope you enjoyed this podcast. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.